No sponsor for this episode. Flick got us blacklisted on a night out. While we're waiting for the charges to be dropped, we're going to have to be doing this podcast pro bono. Thanks again, Bug Boy.
Okay, you're always on my mind because you're called Aegis Mind. Your pigs on my mind because you made a series about pigs. I welcome everybody to what's Machiniphobic Podcast. Sorry guys, I forgot the name of the podcast. We have a very special guest here. His name is Aegis Mind, and he would like to introduce himself right now. He would like to introduce himself right now.
Hey, what's going on?
Thank you for joining us. I guess, and just to say, repeat what Flick said in English. Welcome back to Machiniphobic. I'm Derelict. That's Flick, and we're joined obviously with Aegis Mind today, the creator of such shows such as Otto's Revenge, and kind of a collaborator as well. So, if you wanted to, I guess maybe you should introduce yourself better because you know your content better than we do.
Yeah, I mean, so Aegis Mind, obviously. My first name is David, though. It's out there, so it's not really a huge deal. Yeah, I've just been around the Halo scene for a while. I like to share stuff about like sound effects and record stuff. So there's a ton of stuff on there, sound effects from Halo and Halo 5, like more so. And just generally, if I have like an idea, some kind of idea that I just think it's like funny, and so just kind of like a Halo video. I mean, I'll go out and like make it and play. I play. I play games too and all that. So
Was there anything that kind of got you into machinima, like when you started making it, or was it just something you always wanted to do?
I had watched a lot of it. I mean, I started. I think it was the second episode of R being the chief after he did the first one, and a friend of mine was like, "Hey, R being the chief is that guy who made the Master Chief Sucks at Halo." I was like, "Oh, he's doing a series?" And I was like, "Cool, right?" And so at this point, I think a freshman in high school, or maybe I was in 8th grade. But so I'd seen a lot, and then I went and through I did a bachelor's in animation, and there was a certain point where I realized I know how to make like I like this can't be too hard. I could figure it out. I've watched enough. I've gone through several like courses, and I can shoot a scene competently. At least I thought I could, right? And so that's where the Olive's Revenge thing kind of came from. Is I realized there was I had this idea. I was inspired when I heard the story about Tom French and his pet pig, and how that was like the catalyst. That was like the inspiration for why there's a pig and it as like a prop in Halo 5. And so I thought that was really neat, and I thought it'd just be funny if they were hell bent on destroying humanity. So I've made like a one-off, and it turned into a little 4-part series.
I really liked Otto's Revenge because it wasn't very dialogue heavy. It reminded me a lot of what if you were to put something like Looney Tunes or something in Halo. It had that silent film, that kind of
Oh yeah,
slapstick quality to it, which I really enjoyed. And I think you even said in the description of the video as well, you wanted to make something very different for Machinima, and I
oh
think you
yeah.
did that really well. What did you think of the series, Flick?
Well, the animation was amazing. Like the spaceship, that wasn't in Halo 5, was it? The
No,
spaceship scene.
that was from a different project I worked on a couple years prior, and it was I've been using Maya since like 2007, 2008 ish. So I just love to model stuff in there. So I just kind of had this thought of like, well, I think I could make this work, and it's a little shoddy. Like if you're a VFX like artist, you'll look at this and be like, oh, that's kind of but but I mean, it kind of worked.
So,
So but yeah, though that
why
was
why why
rendered.
did you pick Halo 5 for Olive's Revenge?
Well, because it had the pig, right? And
Oh,
well, the other thing too was I realized to make the pigs move, stop motion was going to need to be used, and I thought about it was kind of like a mixture of ideas that I put together, and I realized I can preview a loadout camera and then take a screenshot and then just move the camera or to go to the next camera, right? So I would line up all these cameras like in Forge and just kind of picture it, and then take the screenshots, load those into Adobe, and then play it back and like, okay, this actually works. And I got really excited. The first shot I did as a test in the first episode was when the pig opens up the hatch, and then it was I think it was actually the shot where the sword goes into the pig, and like it impales him into the door hatch. And I regret not holding like 5 or 6 more frames on that shot. It happens really fast, but once I had that in motion, I remember like getting really excited. I was like, this is gonna work.
Those are nice moments to have when you have that eureka moment where you realize
Oh
that
yeah.
something else can go from this and it can run from there. And maybe you can kind of expand on this a little bit, but with the scripting that you can do in Halo 5, because Halo at the time Halo 5's Forge was the most advanced that had been in the series. With the scripting that you have for objects and such, would it give some people kind of like a rudimentary understanding about how to use 3D software or like animation and such? Because I found that a lot of the stuff that I used Maya when I was doing my own college course, but when I was using Blender, I found only a very small handful, but some of the skills that I had in Blender kind of went over to Infinite's Forge and vice versa. I haven't spent a whole lot of time in Halo 5's Forge because I don't have that much patience, which is why my Forge creations in Infinite kind of suck cock too.
Yeah, I don't think that they would translate like very well. It's really just about figuring out how the triggers worked and just basically saying, okay, I need to put a timer on this, or I'm going to have like a target and I shoot the target, and then there's a 2-second wait, and then the pig moves or something like that. I mean, really, it's just another avenue to pursue your like creative endeavors, right? I mean, it
Yeah,
was fortunately I was like there was enough there, and I mean in Infinite, A, there's no pig, and B, the whole like loadout camera, you can't preview them. So even if they do add a pig, I don't see myself making a episode or anything kind of like that with Infinite. And I also have it's been put on the shelf currently, but there was a feature film that I started like 5 years ago that I have almost an hour's worth done, and that has like maybe another half hour or maybe 45 minutes to go ish. But there's a lot of like animation and like full blown Maya stuff that's gonna be rendered with V-Ray, and so yeah,
Will this film ever come out?
I hope so. Yeah, the first act, I streamed the first act in 2017. It's actually I have it private. It's currently set to private. I've thought about uploading it. If you really want to watch it, I can shoot you a link, but. It's it's neat. It is a prequel, and it sets up the conflict of why humans are fighting pigs and how that all came to be. And I mean there was a whole cast, and I mean I bought this mic that I'm using for my friends that are in it, and I mean a college professor even like is in it. It's great. And like the script's done. I mean like all the dialogue is like done, but I just for a number of reasons I took a break from it.
fair enough. I mean, from what I can see, you're a one-man crew for a lot of stuff. Like you did some of the animation yourself, right? I know you work with somebody on like some of the compositing and stuff, but you seem to be taking a lot onto your shoulders, and I can understand if you're doing the majority of such a big project on your own that it's very easy to get burnt out.
Yeah, the whole project, it has pretty much been me. I have a friend, if I want to plug at Chris of the Dead. He worked at Rooster Teeth for a hot minute. He actually uses V-Ray, and he was actually like helpful in helping me like figure out a couple things that I was having trouble with. But I mean, yeah, it's been pretty much just me. I mean, there is a chase scene that it uses over 12 maps in Halo 5. It uses over 12 maps, and it's like I've spent. 'Cause, I mean, when the COVID lockdown happened is when I really just like went through this scene. It's almost done, but it has over 2 minutes of stop motion, and pretty much every second of footage that you see equated to roughly an hour and a half of time between me just setting up the maps, like actually because it takes place in like a jungle. And I mean, I go heavy with like the lush and the plants. So having to build the sets, and then having to set up the cameras, set up the pig, figure out the like the shots and then execute and then put it in After Effects. It was essentially an hour and a half of work for every second of footage, and so it's some astronomical amount of time spent on this like 3-minute bit. But it looks great, and it pains me to have a lot of this work done, but no one sees it yet. So because I want to release this thing as like a feature length film
on YouTube.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Okay. You talked about all the steps that you make between building the set and doing like the scripting and After Effects. Is there any part of it that kind of appeals to you most?
Oddly, I think it's when a shot works and it imports and you see it play back, and then it's probably the sound mix. I mean, actually going through and adding in sound effects, and you're like balancing all these things going on, and that's the fun part.
I agree. That actually is the fun part.
Yeah, I think the thing that's nice about editing is that you're the first person who gets to see the final cut, and if you're someone I mean a lot of the work that I do outside of YouTube is freelance editing, and I'm usually handed footage by people who don't have the patience to sit down and edit. But I think there's a kind of a people say they don't have the patience to edit, but in editing, most of the time, not all the time, you kind of get to see results right away, because if you just line up two shots in Premiere or Final Cut or wherever, you can kind of see instantly whether or not one shot will click with another, and you will get to see just how some shots relate to other shots, and you can see right away if something is working. I feel like a lot of the process of editing will, unless you have, with the exception of going through hours of footage, I think a lot of the results are kind of instantaneous in terms of you don't have to go through a grade or sound master. You can just see how two clips work together, and then you can start seeing the thing come together. And for someone like yourself, who kind of, and I guess maybe Flick might take something from this in regards to the one self finale, but when you're working on such long projects that expand over a long period of time, is there any techniques or any kind of mechanisms you've developed to stop yourself from burning out or to keep yourself motivated?
Please tell me.
This is one of those questions I wish that you gave me time to think like ahead of time.
Sure.
Really, if the passion is not there, then you're not going to have that drive. I like to think about my projects when I'm in the car. Like if you saw part 4 of Olive's Revenge, the battle and like the city with all those bits, I would drive to work and back, and I would listen to that track. I think No Rules of Engagement, I think from Rambo, and I just kept listening to it over and over and picturing what are the possibilities, what could happen in this part, what could happen at that part. Really, it's for me, everyone's different. And so when it comes to burnout, I don't have an easy answer for that. For me, I like to work on a lot of things at once. And so, but I won't touch a certain project for like a couple weeks. So like I have an Age of Mythology game type thing that my friends and I have been working on. Well, really just me, but we play, we played it every week for like three years straight, and then we took a break. We played a couple weeks back, but it's so it's this other thing, right? But I find that if I have a lot of projects going at once, when I'm not in the mood to work on one, then I'm in the mood to work on a different one.
That's one of my favorite games of all time. That's Based.
Oh yeah.
You're making an Age of Mythology game?
So real quick, I know it's not part of the conference. It's not the main topic. The gimmick is it's Age of Mythology. You can build more. You can build more stuff. The maps are bigger, and you can buy and reuse god powers. It's been a very interesting experiment because of how that throws off the game design. But we've gotten really far with it. And I'm trying to release it by the end of the year, but honestly, I can't commit to deadlines.
So you're a game developer?
I'm not a developer. I just use the editor with the original the original version, the Titans expansion. I've just been building it in that, and it's become a huge thing. But yeah, no, we should talk about that at after the podcast, because we're here to talk about other stuff. But I wanted to go back. You had made a point, actually, Derelict, and I forgot to mention. You had mentioned that the first episode was like a silent action film, and I remember going into it. It was for me, I was kind of tired of watching these machinimas where you had to get invested. And so it was very deliberate that there was no dialogue, and it was very like, let's just get to the action. That was, and I was inspired by the opening scene of the Expendables 3, and I really enjoyed Brian Tyler, his work as a composer. And so and then you throw the pigs in there, and I've never seen a train scene done in like a machinima. Now, granted, these are trains that are really crudely made, but the idea is there, I guess. But
Yeah, that was the other thing as well, is that it gives you all the information you would need to invest in a story is kind of given to you, where it's just the pigs and the Spartans. And I guess if someone, because a lot of media these days is also very much quick fire and stuff. If you look at the likes of TikTok or Instagram or any kind of social media service that'll have stories, is that everything is always bam, 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 bam. And we even see it in terms of the stories feature where you'll have information from a podcast or something being played simultaneously with game footage at the bottom. And that
mm,
with Olive's Revenge is that all the cuts were kind of fast cutting between each one, that it kept you invested the whole time. And the other thing that I liked as well is that you seem to have a very clear understanding about how action scenes are conveyed, because I think Flick recently did a reaction to a friend of the podcast, D27 Shigu, did their early machinima. They did a series called The Hunted, and I think John covered this when he did his guide to machinima, but a trend that a lot of early machinima directors, or a trap that they fall into, is to, when there's an action scene going on, they'll get themselves and their friends to just play out, do it like a play fight in a custom game, and then what their natural inclination to do is to just wiggle the camera around and follow the action as it happens in one long shot,
yeah.
because they think that it'll play out like 1917 or something, where you can just get this really intricate action scene in one shot, but it looks like Michael J. Fox is just handling the fucking controller.
Great film. I just want to say I saw that one in the theater.
Yeah, if you get a
That's great.
chance, look at 1917. But um, and it seems like with you, you have the practice of like cutting between shots and emphasizing certain angles, and it's something that's, to maybe yourself and me, might seem like common sense, but when you put it through the lens of even as something slightly more like, not farcical but comical, like Olive's Revenge, it still kind of emphasizes those important moments. And I don't know, it's something that I want to spotlight, because I think it's something that a lot of upcoming machinima directors can really pull influence from.
Oh, yeah. I mean, thank you. I mean, I took a bachelor's, right, and it's animation, visual effects, and I did take a couple film classes, and I've been watching just a lot, right, and so I guess part of it is just learning the basics, and then the other being just seeing what other people do and just kind of eyeballing it and saying like, what makes a shot good, and so experience wise, I just rule of thirds, composition. Thinking about there's something we learned. It's called cinematic grammar. At least that's what that I was taught, and it's about the unspoken language of what's happening on screen through shapes. And we actually went really deep, and it's incredible when you actually apply these things. It's essentially how to use effective use of circles, squares, and triangles, and just line work. And so, one example would be the Lord of the Rings. The idea is that triangles and hard edge shapes are used for evil stuff, and happy stuff is more curvilinear, right? So, going back to that film, The Lord of the Rings, you look at the Shire and you look at how there have like rolling hills. Their windows are the shapes of like circles. Their doors are shaped like circles, and even their firewood is cut like they're round. If you look at a certain shot where there's like stacked like firewood, and you can see that it's cut in circle, and then it cuts to Mordor, and it's a giant triangle, right, the volcano, and then you look at um Lord Sauron, right? I always get them mixed up. His armor, right? It's all pointy and like jagged and all this. And I mean, there are other films that do this more too. And right, and then that's not the only thing to make sure that you have a great film, right? It's all these skills and things put together. But it was one of those basics, right? And so, and obviously in my series, it's not a huge, it's not something that's like, oh, now you go back and like this is why it works really well. It's like, well, it's something that can contribute to having a impact for what you're trying to do. And the prequel film that I'm working on, there are some elements to that I'm trying to pull off with some of the 3D environments that I'm building. Like where, I mean, it's no secret that at a certain point you're gonna find out where the pigs come from, and so they're like their home base, right? And so it's well, what does that look like? And so yeah, that was a tangent, but sure.
That's really good stuff because I wasn't aware of all that. I'm aware of like how some things like triangles will work in frames and stuff because our art teacher taught us about it in high school with a lot of paintings like the Last
Oh
Supper and
yeah,
stuff and how the eyes are drawn to certain parts of it. But I never thought about the contrast between kind of like opposing or slightly aggressive shapes like triangles or angular stuff as opposed to circular stuff. Blick is a big
yeah.
fan of Lord of the Rings. And for a point in time, he was actually working on a Forge map that was heavily inspired by Lord. I think it was called Battle of Mordor. Is that right?
Yes, no, I finished it. It was the Black Gate on Halo 3 on the sandbox map where I recreated the Black Gate.
Did a lot of those? Were you thinking about shapes and like angles and stuff when you were constructing that map?
No.
Okay, well that's the end of that discussion, I guess.
Yeah, I'd say
Right.
I didn't like this film a lot, but The Sound of Music is like a huge film that if you look for it, it's like super effective, and it contributes to I I don't know her name, right, but the film starts where she's with all these nuns and she wants to go live like a different life and whatnot, and so that's so, but the nuns, what's interesting is all of their headwear, all of the nuns except her, they all have like square shaped um, garments or like their headdress, right? And she's the only one with like a rounded shape on her headdress, like the way it's wrapped around her, like her head. And it even goes into the tone of the film and like the shape language with what she's going through, and then eventually. See, I'm really rusty on the overall plot, but I know that there's like the turning point where the guy that's in charge of like the home, I forget his name and all that, but there's a turning point where the film takes a much happier tone, and what you end up seeing different parts of that palace or that mansion. You see different parts that you didn't see before, and the language in like the interior design is done in such a way where it complements the tone change. And I was like, that's brilliant. So it's just it goes a lot further, and I know that the Matrix does this a little bit. I never said much about Squares, but Squares is like the middle ground. It's about order and structure, and not necessarily happy or evil, but somewhere in the middle. And so I think about the dwarves and like the Hobbit or like the Lord of like the Rings. You look at their structure and how it's not necessarily curvilinear, but it's not really angular. It's somewhere in like that middle ground, and also
What are your
color.
Yeah. Oh, color. I'm glad you mentioned color. Have there ever been any instances when you were composing a shot or when you were lining something up maybe in post production where you I don't know if you always because some people think very literally about like rules of cinematography and how you must always adhere to them, but you know as well as anybody else that rules are meant to be broken. Were there any times when you were putting something together, either in the production process or the post production process, where you actively chose to push against it? Because one thing that I liked to push to impart to people, especially to listeners of the podcast, is that you can breach these ideas and these like constructs of like the rules of cinematography or whatever, but it has to be nuanced and there has to be a reason for it.
Yeah, like the reason has to be good.
Yeah, and flicks like oneself is a really good example of that because it breaks so many rules of what would be just commonplace in filmmaking that I think it kind of goes full circle, comes around to being like some kind of genius. And I don't know. I wanted to ask your thoughts on it because it's easy to ask Flick about it, but I like bouncing that idea off a third party as well.
And it was all
It's
intentional.
it's so hard to go through my body of work and be like, yes, here's where I did that. At least with color work, going against something like on a color sense. I mean, we never really learned a lot about like use this palette for this and this palette like for that. I mean, I've never done like like a really like really emotional like sad scene where I've just like lit it up with god rays and like super bright colors and like warm palette. But like I like honestly, I can't think of a time where I went against the trend there.
Fair enough.
I will say there have been some scenes. There was one scene in the prequel where it's a homage back to the original 4-part series where there's no dialogue and it's like an action scene, but it's like an undercover of night in the jungle, and there's a operation that they're carrying. It's in scene 8, so it's further. It's there's 12 scenes total. So this being scene 8, I don't want to talk about what's going on, but I know that I definitely changed the colors. I mess around with the CC toner and some of the other stuff in After Effects to kind of create a mood that um, is just different. So, but as far as breaking rules, I don't know. I got nothing there.
Fair enough. I wanted to just clarify, I guess maybe if we've already said this, I don't know, but when you say prequel series, you are talking about the prequel series to Olive's Revenge, right?
Yes, yeah. It's Olive's Revenge Part 0 is kind of what I dubbed it as, or just Part 0 prequel. I there's no final like version of that title. It's just I'm just Part 0 is the working title.
Sure. Because I was I was looking at the Behind the Bacon series that you're making about the kind
Oh
of
yeah, Behind the
yeah.
Bacon.
Yeah, what are your thoughts so far, Flick?
People are really going to want to see this prequel series after listening to this podcast.
Yeah, I mean, I would have called it. I think I've called it a series at one point, but it's just a standalone film. At least that's the like the idea. And honestly, I wouldn't expect it anytime soon. I got other stuff going on currently, and I haven't touched the project in a hot minute. But I still back it up to like 3 drives. It's like 170 gigs or something at this point. But
Holy shit!
oh yeah, well,
Into it.
oh well, there's a lot of like 3D stuff. There's just a lot of like
Oh,
footage. Obviously, that's like the biggest part. But
what programs do you use for your animation and your 3D stuff?
I use Maya.
Oh, what the fuck's that?
Well, it stinks that everyone uses Blender, and I'm like, I get it, right? It's it's free, but I started so much earlier that I don't want to learn something different. I can't justify spending the time, especially after learning fluid effects and learning like explosion stuff and smoke and fire and all that, and just again using Maya for going on like 18, 17 years or whatever it is. I mean, not. I mean, some of those years a lot more than others, but still, there's a familiarity with it, and you're comfortable with it. So,
Would you recommend Maya to beginner animators?
I mean, yeah, for animation, it works really great. I mean, Blender is coming to a point. I mean, I've seen it coming to like this space now where it's becoming more acceptable for just the industry, right? I mean, if you try and go into like a job field that is related to 3D modeling, related to like animation, a lot of these companies they ask for experience in Maya or Max. But I'm starting to see some that have experience in Blender. But if you're going to go to school for something like this, it would be helpful to have some understanding in Max or Maya, or even Cinema 4D is another one that's popular. But
Interesting. I'll take note. Anyone who wants to make machinima.
I think that's a good kind of pivot to our next topic because if it's one thing that 3 of our projects share is that it kind of blends the indigenous realms of machinima and animation. Whereas, you've used Maya Aegis, I've used Blender, and then I'm not entirely sure what software because Celtic Horn did the animated segments for oneself, but we've done something very akin to Red versus Blue, where we've blended the machinima experience with animation. And obviously, I think between the 3 of us, you've probably yielded the best results from that, Aegis, because you've made it look very fluid and very natural. And I know you have already spoken about how if anyone who's doing VFX might kind of be a little bit harder on it, but from what I know of the scripting in Halo 5, I honestly assume that a lot of that stuff was, built in Halo 5 and gone through. Um, Flick, obviously had a lot of stuff, and with flicks, like as much as I enjoy the animated segments in oneself, you can very clearly see where Halo Reach ends and where the animated segments start.
Yeah, I couldn't tell when it switched from animation, and it wasn't until the big pig or the ship appeared is when I couldn't tell when it switched.
I
In part
That's pretty
4,
cool.
I built a 3D model of the pig. There's a video about that as well, where I tediously rebuilt the pig model, and I eventually actually have the actual source, the actual model, which kind of stinks, but eventually I was able to through a friend was able to acquire it way after the fact, along with Timmy the space whale. But no, so I used a CG model of the pig a lot for the fourth part. I mean, some of those scenes are just kind of crazy, so I kind of had to. Um, and then yeah, the ship, but that was it. Parts 1, 2, and 3 was all in Forge. Aside from the ship, I don't think there's anything else. I'm just kind of thinking about the first 3 parts. Yeah, it's pretty much just all like in Halo 5.
Out of the 4 parts out of Oliver's Revenge, is there any one that you found particularly rewarding or one that you were most proud of?
4. 4, I spent about a month, maybe a month and a half on the first one, and then I turned around 2 and 3. Well, 2 was really easy. That was turned around in like a month. 3 was a little longer. And I mean, it was helpful because I was making maps from time splitters, and I realized I had to have all these scenes where from like different places that were on, because like my rule was, I think this would be more interesting if everything is forged, because then you're looking at something that you're not familiar with, right? And so I realized I had all these environments. Okay, cool. So I turned that one around quickly. And I guess that death laser coming on the final closing shot of 3, I know there's that like beam of death laser that shoots towards like the city. That was some particle stuff in like Maya. So I guess I kind of lied about all in Halo 5 Forge. But no, 4 was like a huge effort. I took 4 months on that, and I wish I took longer because some of the scenes are a little crude. Uh, that could have been done better, but I restricted myself because the last 2 weeks I was on college break, and so going back into school, the year of graduation, I wanted to get it done, not be in college during in my last 2 quarters and did working, because that was the other thing that felt weird, is like, is it really worth spending time on this when I'm in my final year of college? But I felt so compelled about the idea. I realized it was something that no one's really done before. When I thought about the imagery of these hell-bent pigs destroying like humanity, and I thought no one's really done anything with like the pig in Forge. There's only one that I could think of that I had seen. I think Scupa 92. In fact, I'm gonna look him up real quick, make sure I get that right. There was a video, a Machinima video by a friend of mine, where he used the pig as a character, and I remember there's a shot where he like rolls down the hill. But yeah, Scupa 92 on on YouTube. He did. But yeah, so I saw that and I felt so compelled. I was like, this could be my thing, and so I just went for it and I made it. And yeah, but yeah, back to your question, part 4. I think just because of how much went into it. I mean, there was like, there's a shot when and it's so poorly comped in. Like I was really bad at like green screen stuff at the time. There's the shot where they all run through the like the army of like pigs. There's like 30 something layers. Like I built this massive set with like a big green screen, and I had lanes where everyone ran in like a different lane, and some of them would be man cannoned up to their death. Some of them had an invisible barrier hit them and like knock them back. So I could basically comp in all these different layers and have it looks like 100 Spartans all colliding with all these pigs. But yeah, 4 was great. 4 was fantastic. I was really happy to get it done.
To be honest, I couldn't see any issue with green screen, so
Well, it's
there was
the
enough.
gunfire, the red, like the muzzle flares. You end up seeing like purple. So there's some purple in it, like purple trails of gunfire. I mean, yeah. Thankfully, I mean, you said you didn't, which is great. I guess if you're caught up in the moment, you're not going to notice.
Well, like that's the thing, right? Because you have a practice of kind of quick cutting, and not in the service of obscuring anything, but because you have already established a consistency of doing quick cuts between action shots and stuff. For anyone who's like deeply engrossed in the action, they wouldn't see where the artifacting or where the I don't know, I want to say holes, but where some of the
The
where
flaws.
some of the yeah, well, sure, if you want to say that, but like, because I'm very skeptical and I'm very kind of because I look for flaw in my own work and it's kind of developed a very like negative muscle where I'll look for not the flaws in other people's stuff, but I try to figure out like, okay, how did I do this? How did I do that? And that doesn't just go for machinima, that goes for traditional filmmaking as well. And when I was watching a lot of Part 4, there's a lot of that where I'm like, because the thing is, I've only used Halo 5 for machinima maybe once or twice, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, how did he pull that off? How did he do this? How did he do that? And in fairness, like there were so many times where the cutting was so quick that I didn't get time to process it. There was one or two shots where I saw like you had two lanes of warthogs, like getting ready for the final battle. Maybe that was at the end of was that part 3 or part 4?
Part 4, the opening, there's like a 3-minute opening with another
Yeah.
Brian Tyler track where they're all getting ready for like battle. I think those Warthog shots, I think those were all, well, you know what? I think there's an overhead where I did a bunch of masking.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. It's like
Yeah.
if you just like ran a mask over the other, it's very easy to like separate one lane from the
Oh,
other.
that one
And
was actually a bitch to
yeah,
do. I'm starting to remember it now because there'd be times where a mask point would jump and then overlap on something, and you could see it. And if you look at that shot closely, you might be able to find like a little problem here and there. But I remember spending way too much time on that one. There's that shot where they're all like low. You know what? This is funny actually. There's that shot where they're in an armory and they're all loading guns, and it cuts to like the wide, and there's like 70 Spartans, and they're all just gray and like white. That was me and my friend. So we load up the custom game. I take the machinima camera and I put it in the corner and I block it. Well, I basically go to my Spartan mode and walk around, and I tell my friend, okay, this is what we're doing. We need to have like a bunch of Spartans all loading guns, and we had to keep track of where our characters were. I was white and he was gray, and all those Spartans is just me and him. So it ended up being like some 28 layers that I had to mask together and try, and because you keep moving the Spartans around, but again, I'm in machinima mode. I'm not looking through a person camera because I put the camera in like the ceiling, like the corner of the room. So I had to like maneuver my Spartan around and like keep in mind where I've been for this take and where I've been for that take. But yeah, that was just another funny story. From comping to recording, that 2-3 second shot was like 3 hours of work. It's just stupid. But
you
you have fun doing it, and before you know it, the time goes by. I mean, that's just part of the process. If you enjoy doing it, then you don't really mind how long it takes.
that was the next thing I was gonna ask. I was gonna ask you like, do you this is gonna sound so stupid, but do you enjoy the process of sweating over that work and just like putting in the extra amount of elbow grease just to make that one sequence or that one shot work?
Oh yeah, no, it's about being in the headspace, right? It's about the escape and being able to work on something where you're able to forget. You're able to forget about, oh, I got to make this rent payment, or oh, I got to pay my car insurance, or I'm gonna have to go to work and work, XYZ extra hours, or Monday's going to be hard, like because of XYZ, right? It's being able to just escape and having something to work on that you're excited about and being in the headspace.
I can very deeply relate. It's nice to disconnect and to put time, effort, and love into something else for a little while. I'm sure Flick can relate.
Oh yeah, and seeing the things come together, and when you put it all together, and then it's over, and you're like, well, what do I do now? And then you get caught up into another thing. But I feel like I kind of cut you off though.
Derelict?
Yes.
Okay, he cut you off. What were you gonna say?
Well, no, Derelict, you had set him up for a comment, but then I interjected, so I didn't want
He likes doing that a lot. He likes bullying me.
to.
When you look at your own work, and if maybe you don't watch your own work, I don't know, do you find that there's like a recurring theme or a pattern in the stuff that you convey or put out to the audience at least?
I would hope that I convey to people that I don't care about subscribers. So there's a running joke with my channel that I say unsubscribe for less content because I absolutely hate. I can't. Oh, I would say hate. I can't stand it when people start their video off and before they even get, like, they ask you to smash the like button, hit the bell, yada yada, and you haven't even gotten to the meat of your content. You don't like. Why do you want me to like and subscribe and hit bell when I don't even know the quality of your content? You haven't gotten to what the video is about, right? So I like being a smaller channel. Now, of course, I mean, you ask anybody and they'd say, "Yeah, I would love to have 100,000 subs or 200,000 subs, right? Because then you can monetize and all that." But I would hope that people would see that I like to interact with. I mean, I look at every comment. At least I try to. I mean, I try to make sure that anyone who asks a question, because I put up a lot of sound effects stuff. I like to be able to get back to people. And I mean, there was one the other day, a week or two back, where I'm starting to upload more sound effects from Destiny because I have a lot of them. And one of them asked for a certain super, like the Titan Hammer super, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I can get that out." And I think in 2 or 3 days, I sat down after work and just threw it together, and here you go. And so just being able to be personable with the audience, I really enjoy that. So I hope that the people that follow my work, I have a lot of things I like to do, and my channel isn't just about this or isn't just about that. It's really just about what I want to do. And I hope that you guys find something that you think is cool and even then you enjoy it.
That's something that I really get from your channel is that when I look at all the sound effects stuff or the SFX stuff, is that I see that you have a deep love for filmmaking, at least the sound effects process in terms of Foley and sound design, because it's a department that gets so greatly overlooked. Like
Oh yeah.
regardless of where you stand on the state of Destiny 2 or even Halo Infinite, the sound design on those games has never wavered and it's never diminished. And I've always taken the time to like appreciate and it's easy to gravitate towards something like sound design or the voice performance, but even the way something sound, like if you're using a power weapon, does it sound like a power weapon? When you're using just normal weapons, do they sound impactful? And it's nice that someone like you takes the time to spotlight that and put it on a soapbox and put it out there because I don't know about Flick, but when I look at a lot of upcoming machinima, sure, it's very easy to make the mistake of putting the vocals or the dialogue underneath the sound or the music in the sound mix, but also like
Mhm.
a lot of people might
27.
well, look, your words, not mine. It's when people will use the how do I say this? The in-game sound effects. So if we're using a machinima in Halo 3 or something, that you'll use the kind of sound effects that come with it when you're using a certain item. And some people will take the time to take out those effects and put in new ones, or
Yep.
find some ways of emphasizing, like
Yep.
balancing the sound mix. And I don't fault anybody for not doing this because it's a lot of work to master sound levels and all that kind of stuff. But I wanted to like at least draw attention because we are talking about you and your content. And when we go outside of Olive's Revenge, we look at things like your sound effects videos and we go at things about how you actually emphasize the hard work that these developers put into it. And it sounds silly, but I think that all comes back to your content and your narrative content because all the sounds that you use in all of the range in your narrative content are very crisp, clear, and they all inform the direction that the narrative content that takes, or sorry, the direction that the narrative content takes. It feels like no, what's the word? It's the thing that from Jurassic Park. You spare no expense in terms of like what sounds are important in the mix and what things you want to like spotlight to the audience. I'm using spotlight way too fucking much, but it feels like you're definitely giving the right time to the different things and sound effects. It feels like you're not speed running the edit, so to speak, which is probably the biggest thing in this community that really irks me is when an edit feels rushed. And I don't know what other people say, but I firmly believe that a lot of people try to speed run the editing process because for a lot of people it is unpleasant, and I get it. It's like editing can be really fucking annoying, but the extra time that people put in, especially yourself, put in, it really brings the edit along because you can polish a turd as much as you want. It can still be a turd, but it's like if you just give it that extra bit of time, it's like it can be a really good tasting piece of shit if you really put in the time for it.
We
Did you?
like good tasting pieces of shit.
Yeah, Flick likes tasting shit, don't you? Good man, Flick.
Yes, I
Anyway, as
do.
you were saying. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like your sound effects, Aegis Mind,
Yeah,
because
I mean,
the in-game sound effects for Halo were kind of shit. Well, it's for Halo Reach anyway. Halo 4 they get better.
yeah, it's gotten better. I think. I mean, as as the industry takes a more I don't want to say a more appropriate approach. They spend more time on it just because like graphic fidelity. I mean, it just there it bears reason, right? Going off of what you said, Derelict, is the sound is half the battle. That's half of your video, and so to me, I mean that's how I see it. I had too many. I don't want to say too many. There were a lot of times in college where people would submit their projects, and we would watch them, right, and we would talk about them and like open critique. And I just saw way too many instances of sound like levels being off because they grabbed audio. And I mean, if you're really bad about it, you can hurt people's ears because you have to think about. My setup is I have a home theater receiver and two floor standing speakers. I mix my audio with the speakers, but I also understand at least half of the audience, if not more, they're listening. They're going to watch my video with either earphones or headphones, or maybe it might just come through their phone speaker. But the audio mix is half the battle and what makes your video great. And like what you guys mentioned, every shot in Olive's Revenge, I can't think of a time in that series where I actually used the in-game sounds. Like I dubbed almost everything back in because I realized I can have full control. Like there's the shot where the Phaeton in the first episode, the Phaeton is shooting the Spartan as he's running for cover, and it almost sounds like that would have been the in-game recording, but it wasn't. I mean, that was me actually dubbing in every sound by hand so I could adjust everything on its own level so that so you can make sure that you remember, am I really hearing Pirates of the Caribbean music? Yes, you are. It's a friend of mine. He was over at my house when I was putting that when I was like working on it, I was showing it to him like in progress, and I told him I don't know what music to put in this. And I don't remember if it was him or maybe it was me, but I joked. I'm like, what if it was just playing Pirates of the Caribbean? And he laughed at the idea. So that's how that came to be. And there is a homage in the prequel. Scene 3 has a bit where there's a Pirates of the Caribbean moment with, in fact, another train. So, but yeah, dude, no, sound is just incredibly important, and it really, I really hate seeing when people just throw that over over their shoulder because they just want to get the video done. But it's hard. I get it. But I mean, I love sound so much. If you want, anyone who might want to look more at my work, there is I've done some quote resound videos where I take a movie scene and I dub it. For the most part, it's been with death sounds from Time Splitters, which if you're not familiar, it's made by the guys who made GoldenEye. It's a really wacky game, but I did the Kingsman Church scene where it's pretty much all the death sounds are from Time Splitter's characters, but then I dub in a massive amount of like stabs and gunshots and things being thrown. It just because I'm going back to what we said earlier, I love to mix sound. I just find it to be incredibly rewarding.
Definitely. I'm glad you said all that because I wanted to, at the very least, coming away from this episode, I wanted people to think about sound design and how it relates to their content because it's very overlooked. And on that note, I was thinking about obviously you made Olive's Revenge and you're talking about jungle scenes in some of the prequel stuff. I guess it's a short question, but in terms of the jungle scene that you've been building, was that some of the jungle scene that you used for your not the most recent retold scene, but for season 2 retold part 1? There was a brief jungle scene with a warthog. Was that the same jungle location, or was that a separate one that you had made?
The brief one with the warthog. I'm trying to remember. I know that I used some stuff from that project actually. Yes. There's there's a stop motion scene I know for fact with those whales that were like running in a pack and they all jump up over something. I was so proud of that shot when I finished that one.
There's a lot of stuff that works really well in your retold scenes, and I think for a lot of people, anyone who's watched the RB retold segments that you've worked on, it's very easy to be drawn towards their live action segments because they've really, again, spared no expense in terms of the production design or the effort that you put in. It's very easy to overlook the machinima stuff you've done because your live action stuff is so striking. But for your retold scene, specifically RB Retolds Season 2 Part 1, you had done hand in hand. You'd done half machinima, half live action. Well, maybe 1/4 machinima, 3/4
Yeah,
live action.
I'm trying to
And
remember what Warthog part are you talking about? Like that I can't think of.
it was I can remember off the top of my head. It was these characters that were stuck in like a matchmaking game, or they were like worried about prestiging or leveling up. And what it was, I can't remember what game type
Oh,
it was.
that bit, yeah. Some of that, I think some of that I did might have used some of those environments. You know what? I'm sitting at my computer. Yeah, no, shoot me a link. Or actually, let
Yeah,
me
yeah.
pull it up. I can probably find it. I always get them all mixed up. Which that is that the end game one or is that?
Season 2 Part 1, I think, because it was about the players who take the game too seriously.
Yeah, I remember the scene. I don't remember the shots all like in order. I know that I used my sound effects recording map for some of that. Season 2 retold. That part 2, right?
Season 2 Part 1.
Okay, let me go back.
Because I think Season 2 Part 2 was the one where you did all live action, where you were running around in, like the airsoft or like the Qzar
There's the
arena.
field and yeah, and all that, and like swimming through the lake.
Yeah,
um,
yeah. Which people were just. Yeah, I think it's fair to say that that was the standout scene of the entire retold because it was something that went on for a long time. Like the original scene would have been like maybe 40 seconds, and you went on for about 3 or 4 minutes. And usually I'm super gatekeepy about these stuff. Maybe not as much as I should be, but I don't like it when people go on like tangents where they insert their own in jokes and go completely off the topic of the scene. But when you did that long scene for Season 2 Part 1, you had managed to go on this 3 or 4 minute tangent, and it still kind of worked within the context of the scene because it was somebody taking a scene too seriously and swimming across a lake, or because that was your in joke was that you would say to your friends over Xbox Live that you would swim across the lake to them, right? Or swim across the creek rather.
the original joke was I'm going to swim over to your house because my friend at the time he lived in the neighborhood next to mine, and the pond in their neighborhood drained into a creek that ran through my backyard. So the joke was that I could swim to his house.
But it all worked because your in joke wasn't something that would necessarily leave out. It wouldn't push out the general audience. And without saying names, there were people who were like submitting scenes to Retold that would go on the same duration of a tangent and make jokes that wouldn't connect to anybody else other than themselves. And that was tough stuff to deal with. But I appreciate, the one that you linked right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so those warthog shots in those were all that jungle stuff. Yeah, those are for the film, and you can see all those environments are for that chase scene in scene 7. That shot that I linked you to, that is actually if you're experienced with Forge, you'll know for Halo 5 that you cannot place that much stuff. That was a heavily comped. Like if you study it, you can look at all the trees on the ground and you can see that I duplicated a lot and just kind of kept on messing with scale. And then I messed with like the levels just to create the atmospheric, just like the blue, right? So I mean, it just goes off like the water in the air, kind of like desaturates. I think atmospheric perspective is the term, but yeah,
Oh, I see. I see.
yeah, no, because if you think about it, the Forge canvas doesn't go back that far at all. The camera angle there, the camera is pretty much at the back, like it's up against one of the boundaries of title in Forge. So I had to like again, like with some of the shots in Olive's like Revenge, I like to have these postcard shots, which are just like larger than life, right? And so part 3 at the end, you saw like the city, uh, with that laser coming down. And so with this sequence, there's a few shots actually, um, where it's like a postcard moment, right? And so, but yeah, so I realized with doing a machinima moment for that scene for Retold, I thought, well, I have all this stuff that I've already done that I can use. So yes, the Warthog stuff, the jungle stuff, that's all from the film. And if you want to show that, if you want to show the picture, go for it. So. I mean, it's part. I mean, it's in Retold, so
That's really how do you replicate the trees? How did you do that?
So I just made I think I put a tree up against a blue screen. I keyed out the blue, and then I was able to basically scale. Now for
Ooh.
this shot, I think what I did was I took a sample of some of the trees that are up close towards the foreground on the bottom of the frame, and then I just masked them out and duplicated, and just I mean it was like almost 100 layers of like different things going on, and After Effects took quite a lengthy moment to render like just this shot. At least for the olive film. I mean, I could find the project files and even show you if I wanted to, because again, I keep all that stuff and because the film's not done yet. But yeah, it was just literally just brute force, just masking and like duplicating, messing with scale. Not really much to it.
Me and Flick were going back and forth on this for a while, and one thing I was trying to impart to Flick was to make the change from Sony Vegas to Premiere Pro. And I think with a lot of the practices that you would use in Premiere Pro, you could apply to After Effects because while I wouldn't want to mess with I don't know, the technical consistency of oneself, I would want to see Flick improve as an editor. And I think once you move over to the Adobe suite, you have more tools at your disposal to kind of up the ante, so to speak. And if Flick ever takes the time to go over to Adobe After Effects, you'll be able to replicate the same kind of things. And quick thing as well, it's like I don't when you were using Maya and you were using your visual effects Aegis Mind, or David, whatever, were you exporting a lot of your visual effects as like PNG image sequences, or were you like doing it a different way?
I was gonna go there actually. So yeah, I never even learned Premiere properly. I can get by with doing cuts and stuff and making a title, but I was taught After Effects because yeah, I didn't know this until during college. When you're in Maya, you do a batch render. I mean, for the render engine, that you use, it's a little different. So I've used RenderMan, which is Pixar's thing that they use, which doesn't really do metal very very well, or if it does, you can kind of try to like figure out. But V-Ray, if you guys or anyone else has seen the forklift that I made a couple years back, that is all I rendered in V-Ray, and V-Ray just does metal very well. But yeah, so you basically render out a sequence, and you can do it in TIFF, you can do it PNG, Targa. I mean, there's a bunch of different. I do PNG if I want to save the alpha channel, which is most of the time, so that I can put stuff behind like the blacks or the white, right? Because I have like a layered shot, which I did work on a stop motion series. I did some VFX and actual audio mix for another stop motion series for a friend. But um, yeah, so you render from Maya and you bring it into After Effects, and to this day, I do my video editing still in After Effects, even though it's a motion graphics software. So I'm kind of crazy. I do the motion graphics and the video editing in After Effects, so I get a metric ton of layers going on, and it's maybe 64 gigs of RAM. So it's even with that much RAM, it can be a problem and things will slow down. But I'm just stubborn, right? I don't want to learn Blender because I don't see like a reason to, and I can get by with like Premiere if I have to. But
That's a
yeah,
good point.
that's how you do it though. It's at least with like Maya. I mean, because with 3D software, at least from what I've learned, you don't export, like Maya doesn't export video. The way animation is done, because you render out your passes, like your specular pass and your roughness pass and ambient occlusion and all that. You do those passes, so then you comp it in something like After Effects. You can have the control over all these different things and all these different knobs and dials. And oh, you want to make the specular a little bit brighter on this shot. Okay, here you go. So you're affecting the brightness of everything in your shot because you've exported all these layers.
I dealt a little bit of that when I was using Maya, but because I'm really slow and like dumb, I went over to Blender because it allowed me to speed run, or it's not speed run, but it allowed me to skip a lot of the processes that are I think, inherently how do I say this, integral to the process. So a lot of the animation that I do now is just like I cut corners and I cheat a lot. Um and so for some reason I get away with it when I absolutely shouldn't. But I wanted
Well, and the
to.
Marvel thing looked great, like that intro. I mean, I by no means, I don't hate Blender. I can't justify the time to learn it for me currently with my schedule. But I love seeing what it can do at times. I see some beautiful stuff. Like I'm like done in Blender. Hell yeah, that's awesome.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. And yeah, I guess when we look at someone like Flick, who has recently, in the last couple of weeks or months, has gone over to Premiere. Um, I all I want to do with Flick is like kind of impart the stuff that I'm learning, because I don't think that I'm ever like finished. I think that, at least for me, I don't speak for other people, but I feel like I'm a work in progress, and that all I can do is take stuff from the people above me and try to impart that to the people who are still kind of coming along. Um, and I think someone like Flick
Am
would
I
be like,
am I not above you, Derelict?
"Yeah, Flick, you're always fucking below me. You'll never be above me."
Am I what the fuck?
What's yours name, Derelict?
Mm,
Um, but does any of this make sense to you, Flick, or does it all sound like gobbledygook?
Um, some of it makes sense. Some of it sounds like gobbledygook. You know what, Derelict? You should make a Blender tutorial series.
I did it for Chewie's 5. I showed people how I did that crowd scene where everybody was like clapping in cold storage in Halo 3 for the award ceremony, right? Because it's with the right, because I have 32 gigs of RAM, and I can't remember what. Let me see. I recently DM'd someone what graphics card I have. Where is it? Um, Fuck. Oh, NVIDIA GeForce RTX 2060 Super. Um, I don't necessarily have the best rig on the market. I bought like just below or just above the budget rig at the time, but the amount of stuff that you can do with a primitive build, I think, is pretty good, because again, like what I always tell the people is that for my animations, especially for rigged models like Spartans and Elites from the Halo games, is that with styles like Mixamo, you can skip so much of what actual talent or technical proficiency would dictate, and you can kind of bring stuff along. So if you wanted to do stuff that looks at least a third of what um, Red versus Blue did with Monty you can actually do that shit. And it doesn't take too much, because at the like I don't want to push AI too much, obviously, but there's a lot of apps coming out all the time that'll just kind of magnetically cling to rigged models, and a lot of stuff that's ripped from Halo games are already rigged, right? So people I'm currently working on a guide to machinima at the moment, and a lot of that is looking into things that maybe John would have missed when he made his guide to machinima, which is the overlap where machinima meets legitimate animation, like what you have done, Aegis, and seeing where those intersect and making it not in a way that would make it seem like you have to do no work, and not making it accessible for lazy people, but making it accessible for beginners, because once you have the toolkit for software like Maya or Blender, you'll start to experiment and to do stuff on your own. And that's the biggest thing that I always push to people. If I'm ever, I mean, no one should ever come to me for advice, but if everyone ever does come to me for advice, I usually try to encourage things like experimentation, playing around with software. And I'm sure you're probably the same with After Effects, where my belief, some of the best results you'll yield will come from things like just fucking around with the software and seeing what this fader does, seeing what this knob does, and kind of bringing the results to you, rather than spending 2 or 3 hours on a tutorial. That might not work for everybody, but for people that might be innately creative or innately curious, you'll usually kind of cultivate the results you want, rather than like waiting to be told what to do or how you should do it.
Yeah, I mean, you can stumble. I mean, if you just keep messing around with different effects, this and that, you can. I mean, at some point, you're gonna stumble on onto something that is like, oh wow, this actually works, and it's kind of exciting. Like all of the loadout camera stuff. I mean, I was in Halo 5 when once I figured that out, I was like, oh my goodness, like this is it. it's gonna work. At least I think it will. And then 59 stop motion shots like later for the part one, and I was like, hey, this actually works. I can keep going. I think it was 59. It was somewhere in that range. When you spend so much time on certain projects, there are certain like numbers and certain things that you just won't forget.
So, in your film, your Origami's Revenge, what is it called? Oliver's Revenge?
The Oliver's Revenge. You're not the first one to call it Oliver's Revenge, though. That's a whole another story. But go on.
You had like 16 players, like all shooting. Were they all body actors?
Yeah, I mean that was all. Everything is done like natively in Halo 5. So there
Yeah.
are
How,
there were several
how did you
moments.
control them all?
Well, there were several moments where it was just me getting a group of people, and I knew the shot. I mean, this is where you want to respect people's time, and so I knew I would go into this knowing what my shots were going to look like, and so then I could basically get that hour's worth of time and say, okay, like we're going to try and do this now. Here's what we're going to do. Let's execute, right? And so it was just masking. I mean, there are a lot of shots in there where I knew what the perspective was. Like when the army like charges and they collide with all the pigs, I knew I had to set up like lanes so that perspective like worked right.
So you're saying that not treating your body actors with respect and not being a complete or a cunt actually gets results?
I mean, yeah, as if I would even have that. I thought, you know what? I think I'm just gonna be a dick to my body actors. No, it's a general
Maybe
like
some
rule of
directors
thumb.
would take notes.
Well,
Anyway,
it's well, so I mean, I've been with a few in the past where hey, we're gonna body act at this time, okay, and then they keep changing their mind during the scene because they didn't have any kind of idea of what their shots were gonna look like. They didn't. You shouldn't always have like a shot list. Like when they filmed the opening to Saving Private Ryan, I think it's Spielberg, right? They for that D-Day scene, they just like showed up and they were like, okay, let's figure out what we want to do with the camera. I'm like, that is expensive and really risky, but I mean, it worked. So congrats. But yeah, just respecting like people's time and kind of figuring out, like going back to what I said earlier, when I would come up with these scenes, I'll spend a lot of time listening to the music I knew I was going to use and then figuring out what the shots are. What's happening at like a macro level, what are the beats, and then take those beats and then break that down into shots. It's funny, but it doesn't always go that way.
It sure doesn't. I mean, I'm definitely not gonna name any names, but I mean, um, I was gonna say that for a lot of there's machinima directors who feel like they shouldn't credit their actors, or that maybe they should only be, referenced when the project not when the project, but the project yields a kind of certain kind of result. And it's all a learning process. Like I don't go out of my way to say people should do this or should do that. But especially with yourself, when you think about all the body actors that go in there, and even like for some of my work as well, I always make sure that I credit the body actors that I have, because it's those bodies that you make up. Now, in fairness, you did a lot with yourself and a friend, right, for that scene where everybody was in the armory. So I mean, in lieu of actually crediting people, you can also do a lot with what you have at your own devices as well, as you know. Um, Flick, I don't think has ever used more than two body actors at any given time. Is that right, Flick?
um, no, actually, well, technically yes. In the finale, there's body actors, but in the first 14 episodes, I don't think I used a single body actor. Actually,
Yes,
I just used myself.
in the yet unreleased finale of
Yes.
3 or 4 years. Yes, there is a couple of body actors, but I guess we'll never know because it'll never come out. But I guess as we kind of come out to the end of the hour, Aegis, is there any kind of advice you would have the budding missionary directors? And what I push for when I say this is any nugget of wisdom that you really wish somebody gave you, and something that's kind of something that is the unheard bit of wisdom, or the thing that you really wish somebody told you.
There are moments when you want to skip and move on to the next shot, but treat every shot like it's the most important shot. Take the time. Take the time to set up. Just don't try and take shortcuts that sacrifice quality. I mean, even I've done it, but then you like watch it and you're like, man, why did I like, why didn't I just take the extra 10 minutes to do this, or like the keying on part 1 with the train scene is bad in that the character's armor is black and then green, and I filmed it on a green screen. So what do you think happened?
Oh no.
I keyed out his green armor, and I didn't even realize it until after the thing was done. So that's like the biggest like VFX like mistake I'd say I've ever made. But at the time, I just didn't know better, right? So you really you can sit on the couch and think about all this. I'm going to do this and this, but I don't think I'm ready yet. Just go out and make it, right? And you're going to fumble and you're going to make mistakes, but you just keep going, try and get better.
Just keep going and try to get better. I think that's really important stuff to hear. As we kind of close out here, the question that we always kind of wrap up with is, what are you working on and where can we find you?
Well, it's easy to find me on YouTube. Right now, I got the Age of Mythology thing I'm doing. The film I'd like to get back on at some point. The long story short, I'm working 2 jobs currently, so I'm trying to spend more time for myself. Like I've been just catching up on games that I haven't really played with like Game Pass on Xbox. I've been enjoying that a little bit lately, but I want to get back into the Olive's Revenge film project. I've poured so much into it, like literal thousands of hours, in the span of like 4 years. But like I just can't see myself canceling it. There were a couple times where I wanted to, but because of the sheer like intimidation of how much work there is. But I think it'll be amazing. Like I've rigged the main character. Like I even have I got my hands on the assets for the jungle, like the rocks and trees, so I can completely model out scenes. And I've done some like render tests, and it looks really good. Like I think if I integrate it with the scene with this jungle chase, it's like almost done. It needs like maybe 7 or 8 more shots towards the end. You won't be able to tell that there's a switch. It looks that good in V-Ray. So, but there's some work there that needs to be done. I want to do more sound effects videos. I want to be able to provide more. I have a shotgun mic and a nice setup where I can record stuff, but I just haven't really done much of that lately. Yeah,
Fantastic.
I can't think of anything. I can't think of anything currently that's. I'm working on a game with a friend. I'm building. He's more so like working on it. In Unreal. It's a game called Plasma Storm. So if you follow me, I want to announce that we're returning to it. If you dig on my channel, you can find it. We started this in 2017, before Anthem actually came out, because the gimmick is that it's a multiplayer shooter where you can basically fly at any time, but it's like an arcade style, like map control, kind of like Halo 2. But we had some restarts. He had some stuff go on like in his personal life, so he had to step away. But it's working now in Unreal 5, and it plays really well. I've done some like mass outs, some blockouts on I think 3 maps currently. But he still doesn't want to show it yet. But I want to stream at some point in the future. So Plasma Storm, it plays. We could use testers too. So if you guys ever want to test with us, that is a opportunity. But yeah, so I got a bunch of things that I'm doing, but really it's the film that I want to get back onto. But there's a whole another conversation there as why I haven't gotten back onto that. But I'm like I joked I'm like the James Cameron of Halo Machinima. Like I just keep pushing it back and.
Well, at least I have hope, because at least James Cameron, he did get Avatar 2 out. So I'm hopeful that you will get your stuff out, when the time is right.
Yeah, did you see Master Chief is in it?
No, what?
Yeah, when I heard about Steve Downs being on Cameo, I have to use this. I was like, I have to use this. And so I thought about how to insert him into the film. I think it's in one of the Behind the Bacon videos. I think I show the scene that I added him to, and it's it's a strange scene in scene 3 before some action takes place, and the main character's like, "Hey, have you seen a pig run through here?" And he's like, I had Steve Downs say something like I don't have time to go around chasing alien space piggies or something. But the other segment is him ordering food. In fact, I will get that to you, and you guys can add this into the podcast if you want to. So
Thank you.
And the actual cut, the Act 1 cut is pretty much I would call it done, but looking back, at least 3 years ago I would call it done, but looking back, I want to make a few changes, add some inserts here and there, but it's like virtually done. It's like 28 minutes and 8 seconds, I think, is where it like landed at. But I can shoot you guys a link if you want to watch it. So,
Flick, what are you working on, buddy?
Just the same as last time.
Okay, yeah. Flick's just working on inhaling and exhaling. That's fucking his project.
Yeah.
It's a full-time commitment.
I'm working on the Guide to Machinima. It's going to be, I have the first chapter done. It's going to be a big, beautiful, hour-long video, probably.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm working on Chewie's episode 6, the penultimate episode. I have all the lines, so we're ready to start filming. And I thank you for watching Machiniphobic. And until next time, make sure to report Flick for harassment. See you all soon.
Please do that.
I should have asked you. I wasn't sure if we could swear or not.